You're tuned in to the Ross Tucker Football Podcast, guiding your gridiron journey, none other than your host, former NFL lineman, Ross Tucker.
Oh, yeah, it is. But it's not just any Ross Tucker Football Podcast. It is a Monster Monday, presented, of course, by DraftKings. So fired up to give you my quick hit thoughts on everything that happened preseason week 2, but I can't watch all of it. So I wanted to bring in one of the guys whose company does watch every player on every snap. I can't even imagine how heavy of a lift that is for preseason games. We'll get to it with Steve Palazzolo from Pro Football Focus momentarily. I did want to point out, by the way, this is it. This is the last week to get into the best ball draft with me and Joe Dolan from the Fantasy Feast and get a chance to win $500. The easiest, best way to do that is go to westshorehome.com/Ross and get that free estimate on by far the best bath project you could ever get. By the way, they also do entryway doors. They do windows if you're into those type of things. I haven't done those with them yet. I've just done the 2 bathrooms, and it was absolutely spectacular for them to be in and out in a day and to see how excited my daughters are with their new bathroom. That's westshorehome.com/Ross. So why not just get the free estimate, see how much it is, get into the best ball draft, and look at the videos and pictures of my house if you've ever been curious. westshorehome.com/Ross. It is Big Show time.
The Big Show.
All right, as promised, we got my guy Steve Palazzolo. Listen, if you've been watching for a long time or listening to the show for a long time, you already know. Dude's like 6'10", played professional baseball for a long time. Now he loves football because he knows it's the greatest sport, which I love. You can check him out like I do on Twitter at PFF_Steve. He's the head of football products. Has an awesome, by the way, podcast as well, the PFF NFL podcast. Steve, I think this is maybe an annual thing where I ask you to come on in August to kind of find out maybe some of the rookies that we're not talking about enough that have looked pretty good through the first 2 weeks. I think we did this last year, didn't we?
I was looking at our text history. It was definitely last year as well after week 1 or 2. So, yeah, first look at the rookies is always a lot of fun in August.
Yeah, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit later. It's not the be-all, end-all, Steve, but if a rookie looks really good in the preseason, there's a better chance than not that they're actually good. And if a rookie looks really bad in the preseason, look, we all have examples of guys that have overcome that, but, you know, first impressions matter, I think, Steve, and there's usually a decent indicator with some of these guys. So I want to dive into some of the guys that have jumped out to you. I'm certainly going to ask you about the quarterbacks because I find that fascinating. I called Thursday night's game between the Eagles and the Browns, and I've been really impressed through a few games by both Dorian, Thompson-Robinson, and Tanner McKee. Maybe we just start there, Steve, because it feels like the quarterbacks that have been most impressive so far this preseason are those 2 guys, a 5th-round pick, a 6th-round pick, and then maybe even Aidan O'Connell, a 4th-round pick. Certainly more impressive than some of the first-round guys. I'm not exactly sure why that is, but what have you guys seen over at PFF, looking in particular at O'Connell, DTR, and Tanner McKee?
So we've definitely seen all of them playing well. I mean, we'll start with your game. You did a great job calling the game, by the way, Ross. You got the national audience, the Island game on Thursday night last week. Good work. But yeah, Tanner McKee's looked really good for the Eagles. He was an interesting prospect, huge, really good arm. But in this age of quarterbacks have to have some level of mobility, he doesn't really have any of that. But he was coming out of the Stanford offense where you threw a couple back shoulders the other night. That was like the entire Stanford offense for Tanner McKee. He had a lot of experience doing that. So he throws the ball pretty well, and it was interesting to see him in a different offense. I don't think Stanford put him in really great position to succeed. So he's thrown the ball pretty well so far in the preseason. And then DTR was one of those guys. He felt like he started at UCLA since the 90s, but he just kept getting better every year at UCLA. And there's definitely some people who probably wrote him off after early in his career. He was very erratic, but by the end of his UCLA career, accuracy was much better. Natural playmaking would show up, and we've seen that in the preseason for the Browns. When things are inside of structure, he's delivering the ball. Outside of structure, he's making plays both as a runner and as a passer. We've seen 3 games of DTR. He's looking really good. And then Aidan O'Connell, I don't know what to do with this yet for the Raiders. He just hasn't missed a throw yet. He's been incredible. Big-time throws. Smooth, working within rhythm, outside of rhythm, on time, accurate. Aidan O'Connell's one of those guys, when you watched his best plays at Purdue, he looked like a first-rounder. His best plays at Purdue, it was like, man, this dude can do it all. But his worst plays, he looked like, an undrafted free agent who should never see the field. So I'm waiting to see more and more evidence for O'Connell, but he just looks very comfortable right now. We know preseason stats don't matter a whole lot, but it's his comfort level, his accuracy, his ability to deliver the ball. Aidan O'Connell has been maybe the best quarterback in the entire preseason in the NFL.
Do you think we missed anything with any of these guys, with them being 4th, 5th, 6th round picks? Because they do look comfortable. They do like they've adapted to it. And the guy that really impresses me is DTR, because he's been great from the pocket in rhythm, but then he does have the extra running ability. I mean, the dude laid out 2 blocks the other night. I'm like obsessed with him at this point.
So it's interesting because we're all guilty of the last thing that we saw in the NFL, just assuming that's what we're going to see going forward, and that's who's this year's Brock Purdy? Everybody's asking, who's this year's Brock Purdy? And I'm not saying that there's going to be a Brock Purdy, right? A late round pick who goes in and is excellent, at some point during the season. But is there something to the old Bill Parcells theory of, hey, remember, he didn't want to draft a guy who had under 36 college starts or whatever it was. He really wanted experienced quarterbacks, and I think we got away from that for a while because quarterbacks were juniors, they're coming out. A lot of times they come out after 1 year of experience. Maybe over the last couple of years we've underrated experience, and guys like DTR, guys like Brock Purdy, who have played a ton of football at the college level and had maybe some ups and downs and had those ups and downs at the college level, maybe they come in a little bit more prepared, like Parcells thought, way back 30, 40 years ago. So that's the only thing I might think there is that the experienced college quarterbacks maybe have been underrated through the years, and guys like DTR fly under the radar because you've got this whole body of work of inconsistent play, but by the end, he was a lot better at UCLA and maybe ready for the NFL.
Yeah, and honestly, Steve, one of the things I think about when I think about like this year's draft, I would love to have seen what DTR or Tanner McKee or Aidan O'Connell, any of these guys look like if they were the quarterback at Alabama or Ohio State. You know what I mean? Like, Bryce Young goes 1, CJ Stroud goes 2. I get it. They're really good players. I'm not saying they're not deserving. I'm just saying, like, it's a little bit different when you're playing at Purdue and Stanford and UCLA than it is when you're playing at Alabama and Ohio State. And one of the things I feel like I notice when I watch Bryce Young and CJ Stroud a little bit is they're a little bit unaccustomed to how muddied things are, whether it's their protection or whether or not guys are open. I always laugh. You watch CJ Stroud, I don't think I ever saw him get touched. And, I mean, that one year, whether it was Olave or Garrett Wilson, they were open by like 20 yards on those deep post touchdowns. I'm like, what? Is there even 11 guys on defense on some of these plays?
No, I think it's a great point, and I think it's one of the things that makes quarterback evaluation so difficult, right? The quarterback, I mean, it's one of the things we try to do at PFF, but even with a grade, we try to separate the grade from the stats. So just because a quarterback has great stats, it might not be all him. It might be his receivers. It might be the protection that he's getting. But even then, it's still difficult to just overall separate a quarterback's performance from his supporting cast, his circumstances. CJ Stroud in particular, he didn't really perform well under pressure until the Georgia game, in his biggest game against the best defense, and that's what made CJ Stroud's evaluation so difficult. He looked terrible under pressure until the biggest game against the best team, and then it was like, all right, how's he going to handle that going forward? So it is very difficult, I think, separating the quarterback from their circumstances when you're projecting them.
What have you seen from those first four guys, Steve? Before we move on to some of the other positions, what have you seen from Stroud, Bryce Young, Anthony Richardson, and Will Levis?
Yeah, so I think Bryce Young's, we haven't seen a ton, right? Not much good or bad. You know, a couple. He has had to face pressure, you know, a little bit more than you would expect, I think, and we haven't gotten a great evaluation on Bryce Young yet. So I think that's my evaluation on him so far is incomplete. With C.J. Stroud, we saw that first week he only had the 4 passes. One of them was the terrible one of the interception. He was, you know, 3rd and long, holding the ball forever in the pocket. It felt like old friend PFF Bobby Slowick, a former PFFer, calling the plays there for the Texans. Felt like this past week Bobby really tried to get the ball out of Stroud's hands quicker. Boot action, quick game. I thought they did a really nice job helping Stroud bounce back. I thought he looked a lot better. Last week he had 2 passes that really showed off that accuracy that he had at Ohio State. Deep out, deep crosser. So Stroud, I thought, bounced back from that rough first, 4 passes for whatever that was worth. Anthony Richardson showed off all of his skills as well. He had the rough interception, but it's a little miscommunication on an RPO. It was kind of a weird pass, and then he bounces back to just drop one in the bucket down the field and actually hit a couple accurate passes. Richardson in his 1 start for the Colts. So again, it's limited time. You see a lot of what you saw in college from these guys, but I thought Richardson was impressive for, just the few snaps you get to see him as a starter. He's going to be one of the most exciting players in the NFL no matter what happens this season. And then Will Levis, I thought he had a little, especially week 1 against the Bears, rough stretch, trying to lead, for whatever the preseason's worth, trying to lead a game-winning drive, bad overthrow on an open receiver, throws the game-ending interception. I think Levis has been, not had a great start. And, remember, he was rumored to go in the top 10, little less pressure now as a second-round pick and maybe even 3rd string on the depth chart. But Levis's his development's going to be really interesting because I think a lot of people did like him in the 1st round and he fell to the 2nd.
What I like, Steve, is Labatt Blue Light because it's absolutely delicious. Had several this past weekend down at the Jersey Shore. It was awesome. Already looking forward to having some again this weekend, including in Nashville. I've got Vanderbilt and Hawaii on the radio side Saturday night. Always enjoy Labatt Blue Light responsibly. Beer, Labatt USA, Buffalo, New York. Steve, let's dive into some of the guys, non-quarterbacks, that have jumped out to you. And this first name, as you and I were texting back and forth, he jumped out to me from a post from Warren Sharp, where it was a really impressive move to bend around the edge. Nick Herbig, the Steelers' outside linebacker, and I said this on Twitter yesterday, Steve, at Ross Tucker NFL, I swear since I was born, the Steelers just find guys, whether it's Highsmith or Jason Gilden or, Greg Lloyd, they just find these dudes that are like 6'2", 250, and can get after the quarterback. And at least on that one play, looked like they might have one in Herbig. What have you seen?
Yeah, man, I loved Herbig at Wisconsin. That was the role he played as an edge rusher. I also thought he could play off-the-ball linebacker a little bit. But you're right. That's what the Steelers get. It's like they have the market on guys like Herbig who have incredible pass rush production at the college level. But there's probably some teams who still fall into this old-school 4-3, 3-4 bucket. There's probably some 4-3 base teams who look at a Herbig and they're like, I don't know, 6'2", 250. I don't know if that's going to fit our base defensive end, and then the Steelers scoop him up in the 4th round. And yeah, Herbig can rush the passer. He was very effective doing that in Wisconsin, but the Steelers also like to drop their linebackers in coverage, their outside backers, more than most edge rushers are gonna drop. And a guy like Herbig has some versatility there. I love his athleticism. I remember texting somebody at PFF saying, I just want this dude on my team. I don't know if some teams might want to move him to linebacker. I wouldn't do it, but I love that versatility. So I think so far Herbig, 2 straight weeks, rushing the passer, extremely effective for the Steelers, but also I think he has some versatility, and I just love him as a player.
So one guy that impressed me the first couple weeks, and then he was up and down, I would say, Thursday night going against Nolan Smith. It's just so awesome to see these guys go against each other, Steve. Nolan Smith weighed 238. Dawand Jones weighed 374. So to see those guys, and one time Nolan Smith did a great job. We call it catching wrists, like where he literally took the wrists of Dawand Jones and lifted him up. I mean, I was impressed. Love watching those highly drafted rookies go against each other, but especially for where Jones was drafted, Steve. I mean, he looks like he's got a great chance to be a starting right tackle in the league at some point.
Yeah, Dawand Jones for the Browns. I mean, he was a lot of people expected him to go late first, or maybe especially by the second round. He goes in the fourth to the Browns, and you're right. I mean, that battle with Nolan Smith was absolutely fantastic. But even those couple reps where Nolan Smith got under him as a pass rusher, it kind of takes a while, right? It's not a lot of clean losses for Dawand Jones. That's what he did at Ohio State because he's so massive and he's got that recovery length. It shows up in his PFF production. He only gave up a handful of pressures all last season. This preseason, Nolan Smith got him a couple times, but it's only like 3 pressures, I think, that Dawand Jones has given up so far, and he's seen more snaps than any other player in the preseason, so we've seen him quite a bit. From a pass protection standpoint, Dawand Jones looks really good. I think the Browns got a steal in the 4th round. There's not a path to the field right now. Jack Conklin's your starting right tackle. Jedrick Wills is your starting left tackle for the Browns, but I think Dawand Jones immediately does look like a future starter, and it gives the Browns a lot of flexibility. So, yeah, I love that matchup with Nolan Smith, and Dawand Jones had his wins in there as well. So, yeah, I've been real impressed with the 4th-round rookie for the Browns.
So I was a little skeptical, Steve, when the Jets took Will McDonald where they did. I thought maybe they reached. I thought they wanted an offensive lineman. But, boy, he's looked good so far this preseason, hasn't he?
He has, and at Ohio State, you know, we 240-pounder that they were playing on the interior, basically, in their 3-3-5 scheme. When Robert Saleh drafted him, he called him. He says, "You're playing wide 9 for us." That's his best scheme fit. So they are true to their word. They're putting him out wide and saying, "Use your explosiveness." He's already got a killer spin move. I'm not saying he's Dwight Freeney or anything, but it's that type of pass rush arsenal, right? You got to respect the speed. You got to respect the spin. And he hasn't been great in the run game just yet, but that's not why they drafted him in the middle of the 1st round. So Will McDonald, early in his career, he's going to be getting after the quarterback. The Jets' defensive line looks loaded. McDonald could have 10 sacks as a rookie just because I think he'll get the opportunities. I think they're just going to let him go rush the passer, and he looks explosive with a move set, and I think he's going to be an immediate contributor for that Jets' deep defensive line.
So speaking of explosive, how about some of these receivers that weren't first-round guys like Rashee Rice for the Chiefs and Tank Dell for the Texans?
I loved Tank Dell coming out, quick, fast, and we saw that week 1 against New England. He just gets open, man. He just gets open. His only question is he's tiny. He's about 150 pounds. So Tank Dell, whether he's working out of the slot, outside, he had a nice back shoulder touchdown in week 1 of the preseason. I think he has a chance to be an immediate contributor just because one of the things I look at, does he look quick? Does he look fast on an NFL field? Absolutely. Tank Dell has both, and he gets open. And Rashee Rice was real interesting for the Chiefs. They've got a deep group of receivers, but they were featuring Rashee Rice the other night in the slot, getting the ball into his hands. The Chiefs mentioned it when they drafted him. They love his yak ability. You saw it the other night when he would catch, get upfield. They threw him a ton of screens. I think Rashee Rice, for the Chiefs, he has a chance to contribute immediately. He had a drop early on, but they kept feeding him the ball. I think he could become a Patrick Mahomes favorite pretty early in his rookie season. So it looked like they really want to feature Rashee Rice, and he was up to task the other night, looking really, really good against the Cardinals.
Check him out on social media. He is the man at PFF_Steve. Big fan of Steve Palazzolo and everything that the folks over at Pro Football Focus do. Steve, thanks so much for the time as always. Really appreciate it.
You got it. Thanks, Ross.
Man, that was awesome. Love talking a little football language with Steve Palazzolo, just like I love learning even bits and pieces of a new language with Babbel. Do you know 1 in 5 Americans have learn a new language on their bucket list? If that's you, check it off the list with Babbel. You know, with Babbel, you can start speaking a new language in just 3 weeks. I know there are people that still have travel plans this summer. Get on it. Or maybe you did travel somewhere and you're like, you know what? I really would like to learn that language. I'd like to go back someday and have a better feel for it. There's a reason why Babbel has over 10 million subscriptions sold. There's a bunch of different studies that have found using Babbel for 15 hours is equivalent to a full semester of college. Here's the deal. Special, just for you guys. Get started right now. Get 55% off your Babbel subscription, but only for our listeners at Babbel.com/Ross. Get 55% off at Babbel.com/Ross, spelled BABBEL.com/Ross. Rules and restrictions may apply.
Tuck's Takes.
All right, Ross, we'll start with a couple of news points. We got the Ravens signing cornerback Ronald Darby and defensive end Jadeveon Clowney. The Commanders named Sam Howell their starting quarterback. And Saints tight end Jimmy Graham was taken into custody after a medical episode in Los Angeles.
Well, the Ravens need DBs now, corners, now that Marlon Humphrey's out for at least a couple games. As for Clowney, that guy, Jack, you got to look it up for Wednesday. When the last time is that guy went to a training camp, which is like the first 2 or 3 weeks of the season of training camp? Never. I don't know that he ever has. It's unbelievable. Nobody's surprised about Sam Howell. We knew that was coming. And then the Jimmy Graham thing is just kind of scary, really scary, actually. And I haven't gotten an update there about Jimmy, but he's a guy I know a little bit. I've talked to. I hope he's okay.
We'll get your quick hits on some of the preseason games from this past week. We'll start with the one I think you're familiar with, Browns-Eagles.
Right, and man, we already talked about Tanner McKee and DTR for the quarterbacks that were in that game with Steve. I was really impressed by Austin Watkins and the wide receiver and Mahmoud Diabate for the Browns. He was fantastic. He's been fantastic. Eagles had a boatload of injuries in that game. 3 of those guys have already gone on IR. Not what you're looking for. I did think Nolan Smith and Nakobe Dean both made plays and looked good for the Eagles, which is big since they'll be playing this year. And then obviously, I mentioned this on the broadcast, but last week people have been talking about Marcus Mariota and the Eagles have a backup. I was like, what? He played fine against the Ravens. I thought he played well against the Ravens. Did not play as well against Cleveland. So now it absolutely is a talking point. Speaking of talking points, Jack, I'm going to make this my Labatt Take of the Week. Presented by Labatt Blue Light, the pristine Canadian Pilsner. Enjoy your beers together so you can live life to the power of we. Always enjoy responsibly beer. Labatt USA, Buffalo, New York. NFL players want to play well in the preseason. Forget the scheme and all that stuff. If a guy is playing well, like Aidan O'Connell, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, Tanner McKee, that's a good sign. Like they're trying to play their best. And if guys are struggling, and I won't even name some of the guys that are struggling right now, that's not a real good sign. So these people say, preseason doesn't matter. It absolutely does matter for individual player performance because they're all trying to play as well as they can. Trust me.
All right, next we'll move forward to is the Giants and Panthers.
Thought Daniel Jones looked good. Very comfortable. So did Darren Waller, by the way. Darren Waller's going to have a big year. Bryce Young still under pressure all the time, Jack.
Bengals, Falcons.
I think Jake Browning's been playing better than Simeon for the Bengals' backup quarterback job. Desmond Ridder looked good, and Bijan Robinson's the real deal, Jack.
Jaguars, Lions.
Tank Bigsby is going to get some touches for the Jags, and the Lions have a bunch of dudes on. Kaminsky was making plays. Jack Campbell's a tackling machine.
Next up, we have Dolphins, Texans.
Well, I did think Stroud was much better, like Steve said. And how about the Dolphins' offense? They're like unstoppable, even with Skylar Thompson in there.
How about Steelers, Bills?
Both Jalen Warren, Calvin Austin have some serious juice. We mentioned Nick Herbig, and then you got the Bills' O-line still not looking that good.
Colts, Bears.
Rashawn Johnson, another Texas running back, looking pretty good. And Anthony Richardson didn't play, I thought was strange.
Buccaneers, Jets.
The only thing that jumped out to me here was just Zach Wilson running and looking good doing it.
Chiefs Cardinals?
Well, the Chiefs' backup quarterbacks both look good, Gabbert and Shane Buechele. I will say this, the Cards' defense, much better this year than last year.
Patriots Packers.
Jordan Love continuing to show well. Isaiah Bolden injury was scary, and they suspended the game.
Titans Vikings.
You know, like a lot of these guys, the thing that jumped out was probably Malik Willis running.
49ers Broncos.
Really good sign for Brock Purdy to play as well as he did.
Raiders Rams.
And I think if you're a Raiders fan, it wasn't just Aiden O'Connell. Jimmy G was in rhythm.
Seahawks Cowboys.
The Seahawks rookies on offense look legit, and really stinks for the Cowboys. They lost a good one in their rookie linebacker, DeMarvion Overshown.
And we'll wrap it up with Saints Chargers.
Easton Stick, a lot of quarterbacks running in the preseason. Then Kendre Miller did some positive things. Saints are going to need him first 3 weeks without Alvin Kamara. Other than that, I think we're done here.
Thanks for tuning in to the Ross Tucker Football Podcast. Make sure to also check out Even Money, Fantasy Feast, and College Draft, all on the DraftKings Network on Samsung TV Plus, YouTube, or subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform.
Shout outs! Pizza Boy Brewing, Sporticulture, HumanHeadNYC.com, SteakhouseSports.com, Go-Bengals.com, BackOfficeSchedule.com, and the best gift you can get anyone, anniversaries, weddings, birthdays, back to football season. It's MyFrontPageStory.com.